Hello, my name's Tim James. I'm co-founder of School Blazer, the company that produces uniform for a number of GDST schools and possibly even produces the uniform that you've been wearing. I'm here to talk to you about the global fashion industry and rather cheekily, how we can build a better world one blazer at a time. I'm going to tell you how wearing a School Blazer uniform can help improve the lives of the world's poor and really help to save the planet. But before I get into that, let's just look at some facts around the UK clothing industry. Well, everyone in the UK buys around 26 kilograms of clothing every year. But yet, shockingly, the average garment is worn just 7 times. And this is a massive business. Worldwide, the global garment industry employs 1 in 6 of all workers, whether that's in growing the raw materials like cotton, weaving the fabric, manufacturing the garments, or in most Western economies, in retail and design of the product. And the industry is a big polluter. We're the 3rd most polluting industry on the planet, ahead of some big numbers like car production and transport. And we're responsible for 10% of global CO2 production. So what do you think about when you picture the problems that global fashion creates? Do you think about unsafe buildings, collapsing and burying workers? Do you think about child labour? Do you think about sweatshops exploiting people? Or do you think about the massive environmental damage that's caused by the growth of such raw materials as cotton? Well, at School Blazer, we believe that there has to be a better way to solve all of these problems, and that we have to be part of the solution that the industry has in tackling them and building a better world. And I'm going to make the positive case for sourcing globally and for behaving responsibly in the way we treat both the people who work in our industry and in the world we operate in. So I'll put my cards on the table. At School Blazer, we believe that free and fair trade is the most important way for us in the rich West to spread our wealth around the world. We think this is at least as important as charity and at least as important as some of the other things that people are doing, because it provides people with a long-term and sustainable future. And most importantly, it provides people with the freedom to decide what they want to do with their lives. In most third world and in most developing economies, the choices for people are very stark. They either continue to work on subsistence farms in backbreaking conditions, often with no control, particularly for women, with no control over their lives and no control how they live, often in small village groups where the power of the local elders and their fathers and their husbands can be very, very controlling. Or they find jobs in one of the emerging textile industries, where they'll need their education and they'll need the power over their lives. But most importantly, they earn their own living, come outside of their home, get outside of the control of the family. That's what I think the global garment industry offers. And we have to remember that the global garment industry is right at the forefront in most countries and in most developing countries of bringing people out of poverty. It was the first industry that the UK developed when we undertook our own industrial revolution. And it's the first industry that most countries develop when they undertake their own. So let's look at some facts on global poverty. What this graph does is it looks at the number of people who were in poverty back through to the beginning of the 19th century. And the red line is the number of people who lived below what in our terms would be $1.90 a day which has been defined worldwide as a standard for people living in extreme poverty, and the people who didn't. And you'll see at the beginning of this graph, in 1820, that almost everybody in the whole world was living in extreme poverty. And the trend continued. Even as the population grew slowly, the trend continued with the vast majority of people worldwide living in poverty. And up until about 1960, it was true. Even in 1960, there were over 2 billion people living in extreme poverty out of under 4 billion people in the world. So over half of the world's population lived in poverty. And in 1960, around 1960, something started to change. And what started to change was that globalization began to happen. Western companies realized that they could source overseas. And by sourcing overseas, those countries built factories and developed their own economies, initially to sell product to overseas Western companies, but later to sell products to themselves as their own population grew in wealth and grew in sophistication. And something extraordinary has happened now. So even though we've got more than 7.5 billion people in the world, well under 1 billion of those are now living in extreme poverty. And the number of people living in extreme poverty has declined very rapidly in the last 50 years, even as the number of people in the world globally has increased. The next chart looks at this area of red under the curve and breaks it down by region of the world. So if you look at, this is how many people are living in extreme poverty by region of the world. And you'll see that in 1987, more than half of those people lived in East Asia. And yet by 2013, the number of people in extreme poverty in East Asia was tiny. And actually, all regions of the world declined in poverty, with the one exception being sub-Saharan Africa, where industrialization has yet to happen. And East Asia embraced the global economy more quickly than anywhere else, building textile mills, building garment factories, building electronic factories, making the products that you and I now take for granted. And as a result of that, they've lifted more people out of poverty than anybody else. And we can be part of that. We are part of that as the global fashion industry. What we've done is we've helped to lift those people out of poverty by giving them jobs and by sourcing our garments from them. And we think that globalization is a really fair bargain. We in the West get products at prices that you, our consumers, can afford. And we get access to the best in the world. All the world's best technology in garment production is not in the UK anymore. It's all in fact in countries that have embraced this global economy. They get investment, they get jobs, they get the opportunity to be part of us, to be part of the world's economies. They get real skills. Really importantly, they get genuine female empowerment. They get the opportunity to work outside the home and control their own lives. And they get education, they get health, they get wealth, they get happiness. We think that's a pretty fair deal, actually. We think it's a pretty fair bargain for the whole of the world. But we're acutely aware that we have to be careful, that these countries are right at the beginning of their development cycle. We want to ensure that we pay them fairly. We want to ensure that our workers are treated fairly. But it's really hard because these are countries where it's very, very easy for people to be exploited, as you saw in the charts right at the beginning, with some of the horrors of the global fashion industry. So our goal is simple. We want everybody involved with School Blazers production to have a better life as a result. But we know it's too easy to cut corners. We know we need to be careful that the buildings, the environments they're operating in are safe. We need to absolutely ensure that no child labour is being used in our production. And the questions we constantly ask ourselves is, how do we know that we aren't cutting corners? How do you know? And how do we know that our factories in turn aren't trying to pull over the wool over our eyes and cutting corners? Well, the good news is that we're part of the Ethical Trading Initiative. And this is an international body that sets really clear standards that only the best retailers can adhere to, with a clear code of conduct and a way that we all manage our suppliers. It sets really clear standards on how employment should be freely chosen, on how people should be free to join any organisation they like, on how workplaces should be safe and hygienic and how to ensure that that happens. It helps us to ensure there's no child labour, that living wages are paid, that people aren't asked to work excessive work hours, that they aren't discriminated against, they do have regular employment, and they have no harsh or inhumane treatment. So you should be confident that our membership of the Ethical Trading Initiative should give you genuine reassurance that we're working hard at making sure that our suppliers are adhering to the highest standards. And here are just some of the pictures of our factories. Here's some of our factories in Indonesia. Here's some pictures of the factories that we use in Sri Lanka. And here's a really interesting picture, because this is the shirt and blouse factory we use in Indonesia. And the important thing about this is that the entire ownership and management of that factory are all women. Now, Indonesia is a predominantly Muslim country, and lots of people have some concerns that in many Muslim countries, women are not treated well and don't have great levels of freedom. But in Indonesia, women are treated extremely well and have power and have autonomy, and they're using that to build their own industrial base. And we're really supportive of that. We think it's really, really important that the garments that we are supplying to you are created by people who have control over their lives. So that's the challenge facing us from how we operate ethically and how we manage our workers and how we manage globally. But we're all acutely aware that there are some significant environmental challenges involved in garment production. And here's the problem. The cotton t-shirt or dress uses about 3,000 litres of water, and it creates about 11 kilograms of CO2. But as I've said earlier, is worn an average of just 7 times. We're designing our garments to be worn over 200 times. So we're already doing a better job, but let's look at our carbon footprint and try and understand where that carbon dioxide it comes from. Well, at School Blazer, we make about 140 tons of garments a year. And that needs about 175 tons of fibre, because you waste fibre by producing the garments and their offcuts and various other things. But to make that 140 tons of garments requires 1,200 tons of CO2. We then use about another 109 tons or so to produce the garments, to manage it, to ship it around the world. And interestingly, we can offset that. So we offset the 109 tons that is mostly used in the UK. But the big challenge for us, and the big challenge for lots and lots of industries, is the 1,200 CO2. That's almost 10 times the weight of a garment is actually put into the atmosphere in terms of CO2. And that ratio of around 10:1 carbon dioxide to weight of something is pretty true across lots and lots of things you buy. So if you buy an iPhone, or if you buy a piece of clothing, or if you buy a piece of plastic, that 10:1 ratio of carbon dioxide to what the item weighs is pretty true. And that's the challenge across the whole of the Western consumer world, that most of the carbon dioxide that we use in our everyday lives is not used up in us driving our cars or heating our homes. It's embedded in the product that we choose to buy. So we've got a really simple mantra, and our principle is durability is sustainability. You can't improve the world by just buying more stuff and making sure it's green. You actually improve the world by buying less stuff and making it last. And school uniforms, fantastic for that. You make it last a really long time. As I've said, we design our garments to be worn 200 times. Just think if you were wearing fast fashion every day, you'd have to change your outfit every day, wearing products 7 times and then throwing them away. On top of our initiatives on CO2, we've also got some other environmental initiatives on sustainable cotton, on recycled polyester, on clean wastewater, eliminating single-use plastics and reducing CO2. So this isn't all just about convincing you that we're doing a better job environmentally because we're making school uniforms and you're going to wear them for a long time. We've got genuine initiative to make sure that the garments we produce are greener and are sustainable. But fundamentally, the main challenge we have is to make sure you wear things for a long time. So in conclusion, we believe that global trade is a vital route to helping the world's poor. It's massively important for female empowerment, but you have to be careful who you buy from, and you have to be careful that they are not cutting corners in the ways that we're working hard to avoid. But also, I hope we've done something about persuading you that wearing our uniform reduces your carbon footprint, so helps the planet. So what can you do? Well, the first thing you can do is reuse and recycle your uniform. So use second-hand where you can. I'd like to leave you with the thought that wearing a school uniform as opposed to fashion garments every school day will save more than your body weight in carbon dioxide every year. But also, when you're looking at other garments, take the 30 Wears Challenge. The 30 Wears Challenge is a garment industry challenge to really think about sustainability and simply ask yourself, will I wear this 30 times? If I won't wear this 30 times, you cannot justify the carbon dioxide and the pollution that's being created to make it. Thank you.